One fateful night, under the silver glow of a full moon, King Edric was summoned to the temple where the oracle resided. Draped in tattered robes, his blind eyes glowing with an eerie light, the oracle spoke in a voice that seemed to echo from another realm. "Beware, O King of Eldoria, for darkness brews within your own walls. One of your own blood shall bring ruin upon the prince, sealing his fate for eternity." The king frowned, his heart pounding, but he laughed off the words. "You speak in riddles, old man. My kingdom thrives, my family is loyal. No such evil can befall us." The oracle remained unmoved. "A shadow grows where you least expect it. Beware the mask of kindness, for it hides the deepest betrayal." Edric shook his head, unwilling to accept such an ominous warning. Yet, deep within his heart, a seed of unease took root. He dismissed the oracle and rode back to his castle, convincing himself that prophecy was nothing more than an old man's ramblings. But as he gazed upon his newborn son, Prince Alaric, and his new queen, Seraphina, a fleeting shadow crossed his mind. What if the prophecy was true? What if betrayal would one day come from within? He chose silence, burying the fear beneath his royal duties, unaware that fate had already begun weaving its dark web around the future of Eldoria. Nestled between vast emerald valleys and towering silver mountains, the kingdom of Eldoria was a land of splendor and power. Rivers of liquid sapphire ran through its heart, feeding the fertile lands that bore the richest harvests. Magic pulsed through the very air, ancient spells woven into the stones of the grand castle that stood as the kingdom's beating heart. The people of Eldoria thrived under the rule of their wise and just king, Edric, who was revered for his fairness and unwavering devotion to his people. At the center of Eldoria's future was Prince Alaric, the only son of King Edric and the late Queen Lysandra. From the day of his birth, Alaric was destined to be a ruler of honor and strength. He possessed a heart as brave as the greatest warriors, yet as gentle as the softest whisper of the wind. Loved by the people and admired by the knights, Alaric carried the spirit of Eldoria in his very soul. But fate was not always kind. The queen's untimely death cast a sorrowful shadow over the kingdom. Grief-stricken, King Edric eventually remarried, choosing the enchanting Lady Seraphina as his new queen. With striking beauty and a voice that could soothe even the fiercest storms, Seraphina quickly won the admiration of the court. But beneath her graceful exterior lay an ambition as sharp as a dagger. From the moment she set foot in the castle, she saw Prince Alaric not as a son, but as an obstacle, a threat to the power she secretly craved. She played the role of a devoted wife and queen, but in the quiet corners of the palace, she wove a different tale. At first, her hatred remained hidden behind warm smiles and gentle words. But deep in her heart, a plan began to take shape. She would not be satisfied with mere influence. She sought complete control. And to achieve that, Alaric had to be erased, forever. Deep within the grand palace of Eldoria, Queen Seraphina moved like a shadow, her presence elegant yet unsettling. To the court and the king, she remained the devoted queen, but behind the closed doors of her chamber, she practiced the dark arts, an ancient and forbidden magic that had long been erased from the kingdom's history. By candlelight, she whispered incantations in an unknown tongue, her fingers tracing symbols into the air. Hidden beneath the castle, in a secret chamber long forgotten by the royals, lay her sanctuary, a place where darkness thrived. Shelves lined with ancient scrolls, vials filled with sinister potions, and a blackened mirror that whispered secrets only she could hear. It was here that she planned the downfall of Prince Alaric. Her hatred had grown unchecked over the years. Though she masked it well, she despised the way the people adored him, the way King Edric spoke of him with pride. The prince was everything she could never be: noble, strong, and most of all, the rightful heir. She was the queen, yet she held no true power. Unless Alaric was removed, Seraphina did not act in haste. A sudden misfortune would raise suspicion. Instead, she wove a careful web of deceit, poisoning the minds of the court against him. It started with whispers. Servants who once spoke fondly of the prince now murmured uncertainties. Have you noticed how the prince disappears for hours? What secrets does he keep? He grows distant, does he not? Perhaps he does not love his people as much as we thought. The queen's reach extended beyond mere servants. She approached trusted advisors, planting doubts like seeds in fertile soil. In the grand halls of the court, she let her voice waver with false concern. I fear for the king, she sighed before the nobleman. Prince Alaric is headstrong, reckless even. He does not understand the burden of ruling. What if he is not ready? A single doubt in the mind of one advisor spread like wildfire. The court grew wary. Nobles who once praised Alaric now second-guessed his actions. When he trained with the knights, they whispered of his aggression. When he spent time alone, they questioned his loyalty. Even King Edric, though he loved his son, began to see shadows where there were none. The queen's gentle words filled his ears night after night. Perhaps you should guide him more closely, my love. He is still young, and power can be dangerous in the wrong hands. Seraphina's plan was working. She had planted the first seeds of destruction. Soon they would take root, and when the time was right, she would strike the final blow. For months, Queen Seraphina had worked in the shadows, twisting words, planting doubts, and ensuring that when the time came, the kingdom itself would turn against Prince Alaric. But mere rumors were not enough. She needed something undeniable, something so grave that even King Edric, despite his love for his son, would be forced to act. The perfect opportunity came on the night of the Harvest Festival, a grand celebration where nobles, knights, and citizens gathered to honor Eldoria's prosperity. The castle was alive with music and laughter, torches illuminating the vast halls as feasts were laid before the people. It was on this night, under the cover of celebration, that Seraphina put her final plan into motion. With the help of her dark magic, she crafted an illusion, one so convincing that even the most loyal of Alaric's allies would hesitate to defend him. A scream tore through the night, silencing the festivities. A royal advisor, Lord Garrick, lay lifeless in the grand hall, his body cold and unmoving. The people gasped in horror as Seraphina, dressed in white like a grieving widow, stumbled forward, her face painted with sorrow. It was the prince, she whispered, just loud enough for all to hear. Gasps filled the room. No, Alaric breathed, stepping forward, his eyes filled with confusion. This is a lie. But Seraphina was ready. With a wave of her hand, a dark mist curled through the air, forming ghostly images, a vision of the prince standing over Lord Garrick's body, his sword glistening with blood. It was an illusion, but none could tell. The guests reeled back in horror. The prince has betrayed us, someone shouted. King Edric rose from his throne, his face pale. Alaric? His voice wavered, filled with disbelief. I did no such thing, Alaric said firmly, his heart pounding. But the evidence was too strong, the fear in the eyes of the court too real. Seraphina fell to her knees, weeping. I loved Lord Garrick as a brother, she sobbed. But the prince, his ambition has clouded his mind. My king, if he can do this now, what will he do when he holds the throne? The king's hands trembled. For the first time, the seed of doubt fully bloomed. He had ignored the whispers, the rumors, but this was undeniable. The weight of the kingdom pressed upon him. You have betrayed your people, he said at last, his voice thick with sorrow. You have betrayed me. No, Alaric cried, but the guards had already stepped forward, swords drawn. From the crowd, his loyal friends tried to intervene. Sir Darius, his most trusted knight, reached for his weapon, but archers on the balcony above were ready, arrows aimed. Lady Evelyn, his childhood friend, called out, This is madness. He would never. But it was too late. King Edric raised his hand, and in that moment, Alaric knew. His father had already made his decision. "Take him to the dungeons," the king commanded. "Tomorrow his fate shall be decided." As the guards seized him, Alaric did not struggle. His mind raced, trying to understand how everything had turned so wrong. His stepmother, standing behind his father, caught his gaze. And then, for the first time, she let the mask slip, just enough for him to see the victorious smirk hidden behind her false tears. Alaric's blood turned cold. He had fallen into her trap. The cold stone walls of the dungeon echoed with silence as Prince Alaric sat in chains, his once proud form now broken by betrayal. He had spent the night replaying the events, searching for a way to prove his innocence. But every path led back to the same truth. His stepmother had orchestrated it all. Above him, the castle prepared for his sentencing. The court whispered of treason, the nobles demanded justice, and the people, those who once cheered his name, spoke of their prince with fear. Queen Seraphina had won. When the guards arrived, they did not take him to the gallows or a trial before the king. Instead, they led him through darkened corridors, deeper into the castle's forgotten chambers. Confusion twisted in his mind until they stopped before an ancient door. The torches flickered, their light barely touching the blackened wood. He had never seen this place before. Seraphina stood waiting, dressed in flowing robes of deep crimson, her face serene with victory. "My dear prince," she said, stepping forward, "your father believes you will be imprisoned for life, but we both know you are far too dangerous for that." Alaric clenched his fists. "You will not get away with this." She only smiled. "I already have." With a single whisper, the air thickened. The guards stepped back as shadows curled from the floor, swirling around Alaric's feet. He fought against the unseen force, but his body refused to move. The darkness climbed higher, tightening around his limbs, his chest, his throat. Cold seeped into his bones. He tried to breathe, but the world around him shifted. His fingers stiffened, his heartbeat slowed, and before he could scream, the spell completed. His body was no longer flesh and blood. Seraphina stepped closer, tilting her head as she examined her work. The prince was now a prisoner, not in chains, but in an eternal curse. His form had turned to living stone, a perfect statue frozen in time. His eyes, still filled with anger and despair, remained open, forced to witness everything yet unable to speak, to move, to fight. A perfect punishment. The chamber was sealed, hidden behind layers of enchantments. No one would find him. No one would remember him. Days turned to weeks. The people of Eldoria spoke of the prince less and less. His name, once a song in the streets, faded like a forgotten melody. Memories of him grew hazy, as if he had been nothing more than a dream. In the throne room, King Edric sat in silence, haunted by his decision. Guilt weighed heavily on his heart, yet every time he tried to recall his son's face, it blurred like mist before dawn. He did not understand why, only that something felt missing. Seraphina sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his. "You did what was necessary," she whispered, and the kingdom of Eldoria moved on, unaware that its true heir remained trapped in darkness, unseen and unheard. Forever. Years passed, and Eldoria changed. The once vibrant kingdom, filled with music and joy, grew quieter under Queen Seraphina's rule. King Edric, once strong and wise, had become a mere shadow of himself. His once sharp mind dulled with each passing year, his health failing under the weight of guilt he could not name. Night after night, he dreamed of something, or someone, just beyond his memory's reach, but no matter how hard he tried, he could never grasp it. Seraphina, now the true ruler in all but name, strengthened her grip on the court. With the king too weak to govern, she made decisions unchecked, bending the kingdom to her will. The people still respected their ruler, but fear had begun to settle in their hearts. Dissenters vanished, and whispers of rebellion were silenced before they could grow. Yet, despite her near-total control, one thing continued to trouble Serafina. The spell she had cast on Prince Alaric was unbreakable, or so she had believed. But dark magic always left traces, and there were those who still sought the truth. Among them was a lone seeker of justice. Perhaps it was a brave young princess from a neighboring kingdom, drawn by rumors of Eldoria's cursed fate. Perhaps it was a knight, once loyal to the prince, who had spent years searching for answers. Or perhaps it was a childhood friend, someone who had never truly believed in the lies that surrounded Alaric's disappearance. Whoever they were, they had not forgotten. Their search led them to the ancient libraries of Eldoria, where dust-covered scrolls held secrets long buried. Among them was a forgotten prophecy, one that spoke of a betrayal, a curse, and a prince lost to time. When shadows consume the rightful heir, only the flame of truth shall break the despair. Forgotten he stands where the echoes call, waiting for light to shatter the fall. It was vague, but it was enough. The truth had not been erased completely, only hidden. Somewhere, deep within the castle, Alaric was still there, trapped in a fate worse than death. Determined, the seeker knew that the time for silence was over. If the prince could still be saved, they would be the one to find him, even if it meant facing the queen's wrath. The hero knew that freeing Prince Alaric would not be simple. Queen Serafina had spent years weaving her web of deception, ensuring that no one dared question her rule. To break the curse, the truth had to be uncovered. But finding proof against the queen was a nearly impossible task. With only the prophecy as a guide, the hero set out on a dangerous journey beyond the castle walls. The first step was seeking knowledge, and for that, they had to find someone who understood the nature of the curse. Legends spoke of an ancient sorcerer who lived deep in the Forbidden Forest, a place untouched by time. The path was treacherous, filled with monstrous creatures, enchanted traps, and the ever-present darkness that sought to turn travelers astray. Yet, after days of struggle, the hero finally reached the sorcerer's hidden sanctuary. The sorcerer, an old being with eyes that held centuries of wisdom, listened as the hero spoke of Alaric's fate. He nodded solemnly, tracing his fingers over a glowing crystal. "The curse upon the prince is powerful," he murmured. "It is bound not just by magic, but by lies. To break it, the truth must be revealed for all to see." The hero leaned forward. How? How can I prove the truth?" The sorcerer's gaze darkened. "Only two things can shatter the spell. Either the one who cast it must confess to their crime before the kingdom, or undeniable proof must be presented that reveals the stepmother's deception." The words weighed heavily. Serafina would never confess willingly. Her entire rule depended on the lie she had built. That left only one option: uncovering evidence that would expose her once and for all. But where could such proof be found? The sorcerer offered one final clue. Magic always leaves a trace. Somewhere within the castle, in the places she believes are forgotten, you will find what you seek. With renewed determination, the hero returned to Eldoria, knowing the battle ahead would be the most difficult yet. They had to outsmart the queen, uncover the secrets she had buried, and most importantly, find a way to make the people remember the prince they had lost. Time was running out. If Serafina discovered their plans, they wouldn't live long enough to see the curse broken. The hero returned to Eldoria under the cover of night, their heart pounding with the weight of what they carried: the truth. They had uncovered hidden scrolls in the castle's abandoned chambers, journals detailing Serafina's secret dealings, and, most importantly, an enchanted relic containing echoes of her spell, the very magic that had cursed Prince Alaric. With dawn approaching, the hero knew there was only one chance. The court had gathered in the grand hall, expecting nothing more than another day under Serafina's rule. But today, the lies would end. Stepping forward, the hero raised their voice. "People of Eldoria, you have been deceived. Your true prince was never a traitor. He was cursed, and his memory stolen from you." Gasps rippled through the hall. But Seraphina remained calm, her lips curling into a mocking smile. "More foolishness," she purred. "Who are you to challenge the queen?" The hero held up the enchanted relic. "This holds the truth." With a swift motion, they shattered it against the marble floor. A surge of dark energy burst forth, twisting into the air, and then the whispers began. The voices of the past, trapped in the spell, echoed through the chamber. They spoke of Seraphina's deception, of the prince's innocence, of the night he was taken. The illusion she had crafted began to unravel, and the court, the nobles, and even King Edric himself were forced to hear the truth. Seraphina's eyes burned with fury. "You dare!" Dark magic crackled at her fingertips as she raised her hands, ready to strike down the hero. But before she could unleash her power, the room grew colder. Shadows twisted, forming a familiar figure, a ghostly presence with piercing eyes. Prince Alaric. Though bound by the curse, his spirit had awakened, drawn by the breaking spell. With one final effort, he reached toward the queen, his voice echoing like a storm. "Your reign of lies ends today." For the first time, fear flickered in Seraphina's eyes. She lashed out, but her magic faltered against the truth now revealed. King Edric, finally seeing everything for what it was, rose from his throne. "What have I done?" His voice broke with regret as he turned to his queen. "No, the traitor. Seraphina, you have betrayed this kingdom, and for that, you shall answer." But it was too late. The spell's unraveling had turned against her. The dark magic she had wielded for years now clawed back at her, consuming her in a storm of shadows. She screamed as the darkness pulled her under, until there was nothing left. The grand hall fell silent. The hero stood breathless, the prince's shadow fading. The curse was breaking. But was it enough to bring Alaric back? As the last echoes of Seraphina's screams faded, the dark magic that had bound Prince Alaric for years began to unravel. The chamber trembled, ancient spells breaking apart like shattered glass. A deep, resounding pulse of energy filled the room as the air thickened, crackling with unseen power. The stone figure of Alaric, locked away for so long, began to glow with a golden light. Cracks formed along its surface, the remnants of the curse struggling to hold on. Then, with a final surge of energy, the statue shattered, revealing the prince, gasping as he collapsed to the ground. The court stood frozen, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Alaric was alive. He had returned. King Edric rushed forward, falling to his knees beside his son. "Alaric, my son," he whispered, his voice thick with grief and guilt. But Alaric did not respond immediately. His body was free, but his soul had endured years of torment in isolation. His eyes, once filled with warmth, were now shadowed with something darker, something broken. The hero, who had fought so hard to bring him back, watched in silence, knowing that victory had come at a cost. The prince had returned, but he was not the same man who had once laughed in the castle halls. Seraphina's dark magic had not simply imprisoned him, it had changed him. He had felt every second of his exile, trapped between existence and oblivion, forced to watch time pass without him. The world had moved on, but he had remained frozen, lost in the void of his own despair. The court erupted in cheers, but Alaric barely acknowledged them. His gaze remained distant, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, almost hollow. "She is gone?" The hero nodded. Her own magic consumed her. Alaric exhaled slowly, but there was no relief in his eyes, just exhaustion, just emptiness. King Edric placed a trembling hand on his son's shoulder. "Can you forgive me?" The prince did not answer right away. He simply looked at his father, the weight of betrayal still fresh despite the years. Finally, he whispered, "I don't know." The kingdom of Eldoria entered a new era that day. The rightful heir had returned, and the darkness that had threatened to consume the land was gone. The people rejoiced, celebrating the prince's freedom. But for Alaric, things would never be the same. He had survived, but at what cost? In the months that followed Queen Seraphina's fall, Eldoria underwent a transformation. The fear that had gripped the kingdom for years was slowly replaced by hope. Reforms were introduced to ensure that no ruler could ever manipulate justice as Seraphina had. A council of wise advisors was formed, and new laws were put in place to protect the people from corruption. The kingdom, once shrouded in deceit, began to heal. But even as the kingdom moved forward, Prince Alaric remained at a crossroads. The court expected him to take his rightful place as king. The people looked to him for leadership, believing that his suffering had given him the wisdom to rule justly. But Alaric was no longer the prince they had lost. He was something else now. The years in the void had left a mark on him. Though the curse had been broken, traces of Seraphina's dark magic still lingered in his soul. Sometimes, in the dead of night, he would catch glimpses of shadows moving where none should be. He would hear whispers, faint, distant, like an echo from the past. He knew the magic had not fully left him. Standing on the balcony of the castle, overlooking the city he had once loved, he felt an unease he could not shake. He had won his freedom, but at what cost? The people expected a ruler, but he was not sure if he could give them what they needed. One evening, as he wandered through the castle's abandoned halls, he stopped in front of a tall mirror. His reflection stared back at him, tired, haunted, different. But then, for just a second, something else flickered in the glass. A shadow, a familiar smirk, Seraphina. Alaric turned sharply, but the room was empty. A chill ran down his spine. Was it a trick of his mind? A remnant of the magic she had wielded? Or was she still there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to return? As the coronation day approached, Alaric stood before the court and made his decision. Eldoria needs a ruler who can guide it into the future without the weight of the past haunting them. That is not me. Gasps filled the room, but Alaric remained firm. He looked to the council, to the hero who had saved him, and to the people who had fought for the truth. My path lies elsewhere. There are questions I must answer, shadows I must confront, but I leave this kingdom in the hands of those who will protect it. And so, the prince who had been lost chose a different road. Some say he wandered far beyond the borders of Eldoria, seeking a way to rid himself of the last remnants of Seraphina's curse. Others whisper that he still watches over the kingdom from the shadows, ensuring that darkness never takes hold again. But one thing remained certain. Eldoria had been reborn. And in the depths of the castle, in the places no one dared to go, the mirror remained, waiting.